both institutions, I should say. We'll kind of keep this, I wouldn't say, yeah, I guess kind of informal in a way, maybe.
Should we move up front?
No. Obviously, I talked to the both of you and kind of have a better understanding of some of your initiatives that may be coming down the pipeline. But what's your name, sir? Rich?
Rich.
No, why are you here?
I do all the building floor plans. I'm in the process of doing 3D models.
Okay.
He knows Revit too. So.
Okay. Good. Yeah, we've actually learned a lot this short couple days. As you can imagine, as you probably both know, I mean, we're working a lot with universities within the manufacturing of the core products of mechanical, EAC, etc. So, trying to understand where BIM plays in that Division 8, Division 28 is we're still understanding that. And from what I've gathered this week, I've talked to a number of schools, and you all are kind of in the same situation as far as where you want to take this. And this whole spatial and gathering this work, like student flow and wayfinder on campus and everything was new to us. So it's kind of, we were always thinking when you think of new construction so much, but it's like, how do you collect all that data on the back end, specifically related to doors, frames, and hardware? I mean, you're doing a lot now with ADA openings, fire rated openings. So the question is, I see a link now between when that, however you're collecting that data and who you're going to use to do that, you have a significant opportunity to collect other information related to closers, exit devices, access control components, so which in return will then contribute to your ongoing life cycle analysis of your hardware and doors and openings. So that was something that we always talk about. It's like, hey, we got a great solution for the new construction, but aftermarket's kind of fuzzy a little bit on the back end. How is that? It still is a little bit because who's going to collect that data? Are they knowledgeable about that data? To give you an example, Penn State, they actually hired one of their contract hardware distributors to go around. They put an RFP out for that, and they're capturing all that data from 2,100 exterior doors. So they have someone that's knowledgeable about doors, frames, and hardware. So someone is a student that may go around and collect this information may not even know. So it's like bad information in, bad information out. So those are things that we're going to kind of touch on, is just to understand how doors, frames, and hardware play in that arena, and then obviously create some awareness for both institutions here to take back with you. And you guys are obviously, 3 of you are involved in doors, frames, and hardware, it sounds like. So this isn't going to be too far off your path. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Aaron here to kind of dive into some of this and ask questions at any time.
Yep.
You'll be fighting for spots probably to do that.
Question number 1.
I'm going to show you some Revit stuff too, because Rich was asking some questions. So I'll show you some options you have with door families. And it's stuff that we can do, other softwares can do. I can give you a full range of options that are available out there. And that's good to know for when you're working with your architect, what you expect your architects to do also. So we'll kind of cover that as well. So I am going to go kind of a high level. I threw this slide up when I did the Spark session about how we're moving from 1.0 to 2.0. It's a really big deal for us in our industry. Some industries are moving really fast in the BIM world and other ones are lagging behind. We're probably one that's lagging behind, and we're trying to keep up. And I think we're doing pretty darn well, to be honest. Mostly because we've made it an initiative and we're trying to understand it. We've been working with architects for about 4 years, so we have a lot of experience with how they're dealing with BIM. And just to give you an example, when we first started, we always thought we could tell architects what to do. We could get them all on the same page and all working the same way. And that's not true at all. Everybody's different. And we're finding out that's the same thing is true with contractors, and the same thing is true with the end users and the owners. So it's all very interesting. But I have this fun slide, kind of walks us through the evolution of technology. We went from paper. I don't know, he can own it or not, we'll take it. But of course we have the paper world, and very rapidly we went from faxing to little tiny computers, to bigger computers, to laptops, to Blackberries. Did anybody in here have a Blackberry? Did everybody in here have a? No. I had something called a Black Jack, which was like a knockoff of the BlackBerry, and I loved it. Most people love their BlackBerries, to tablets. And it's kind of funny, as I was looking at this morning, I thought, you know, when tablets first came out, everybody said, I don't need a tablet. Why would I want a tablet? And now everybody has an iPad, and they use it all the time. BIM is kind of that way, too. A lot of people started out saying, I'm not sure how I'm going to use that. I'm not sure it's worth the investment, and you're getting there. And then recently, we've come up with the cloud, or somebody came up with the cloud and started calling it that. When I came out of college a few years ago and I went into the world, I had no idea what the cloud was. I wasn't taught that in school. And everybody kept talking about this mysterious cloud thing. And I didn't understand that, but then I learned over time that you no longer have to buy computers with tons of space on them because you can store everything in your cloud now. So, and then that data is accessible from anywhere, and you can do things like pull it into your tablet and have it out in the field for construction or for reviewing things, capturing existing openings, things like that. So it is a new world. For us in particular, a lot of this stuff is changing for us. Integrated project delivery is becoming much more common. Sustainability is a really big deal. And I've just noticed around here how, you know, they have all the different trash cans just for recycling. I mean, and there's doors and hardware and other processes out there that are becoming very green. Virtual design standards are very common, or becoming very common. They're hard because they take a lot of work to get in and get done up front. I think that's probably one of the hardest things about BIM is all the work you have to do just to get started to have good information. And then lean construction. So there's a number of distributors out there that are doing lean construction where they're pre-building openings before they get to the site. So you don't have all this waste, and you don't have, you know, 100 locks here and 100 exit devices and 200 closers and all these pieces that somebody has to sort through and put together in order to build one opening. So lean construction is helping cut down on somebody, relying on somebody to get all the pieces and parts right on the right door. So that's become a big deal for us too. And of course, all of these different players in the game, end users in particular, are buying into this as well. And actually, what's missing probably from that circle is security consultants are starting to get involved too. They're starting to say, hey, I want to get in with that architect and see their BIM model and make sure I'm getting my card readers and all of my wiring and cameras in the right locations. So, because they're kind of missing out right now and they really want to be part of it.
And when you look at that bubble there, that red one, actually a gentleman that's here, Sean Holland from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. They have a $120 million event center project going on with Canon, one of the large architectural firms that focuses on education. To give you an example of all the different areas of a breakdown, and not communication, but just where things could just get missed. We're actually working with the end user, with one like a Rich Bond, counterpart to him, is working with the school, and they've approved our hardware, et cetera, and they've asked that their first project to be delivered in Revit, which is new to them. So they're kind of going through a similar process where they're going to be building information from existing buildings, and now this new project's going to tie into that. Well, we wrote the spec, and we wrote it in Opening Studio for Canon. But Canon, for whatever reason, at this time, wasn't planning on delivering that model of doors, frames, and hardware to the end user. And the end user has an initiative going on that they kind of would want this information. So there's so many different areas of the breakdown that now, if we weren't here talking to Sean, he may have received models that weren't complete, 100% complete with everything in it. So it's very important to, you know, the takeaway there, I guess, is to make sure that, you know, your architects that you hire and that they understand truly what your initiatives are outside of maybe just that current project that you're working on, because things could fall through the cracks very easily. So very, very complicated. So.
No, well, that ties in actually really well to this next point, is doing new things in old ways, and we deal with this with architects all the time. One of my coworkers likes to say, he's like, I don't understand why this architect is trying to use Revit like it's AutoCAD. And it kind of falls into that same line of, if you're receiving the model at the end, if you have your architect use Revit, but you're still receiving just plans in the end, you're really not doing anything a whole lot different. Maybe up until that point you are, but you're missing out on the being able to do new things new ways. So this kind of just goes into the, a lot of people are still here. Actually, a lot of people are more like here, still thinking in 3D, but doing a lot of things 2D, and they're trying to get into the 3D world. And that's certainly where we're at. We're trying to build more intelligent openings, even though they're not a lot of times going past the architect. That information is there and could eventually be passed on. And so we've really set ourselves up to do BIM well as many of our competitors have done the same thing. It's not just us, but our competitors are working on it. Anybody involved in doors is starting to think this way. So this just gives you some statistics, because those are always kind of fun. About 70% of architectural firms out there are using some form of BIM. The ones that are left behind are usually the littler firms, or the firms that, for whatever reason, their consultants haven't switched over to BIM, and so they're still trying to stay on the same path as them. Go ahead.
Question. I assume that's a characteristic you're looking for in an architectural firm, someone that's utilizing as you're selecting that product. Okay.
So, and then contractors are actually moving faster with BIM now than architects are. I don't know if you've heard that number before, but that was kind of new to me about a year and a half ago, was that, architects were kind of slow to get started, but contractors just basically went straight up with it. They grabbed onto it and ran with it because they can save money using BIM. And, that's a great thing for a contractor. It's a good thing for architects too. But and then federal, state, and private entities are jumping on board with BIM and have BIM standards and things like that going on. Just last week, we heard from the Army Corps of Engineers asking questions about what they could do for doors with BIM. So they're all thinking about it and processing it.
The Wisconsin team in here, have you guys been receiving projects in Revit currently on your state funded buildings? A couple? Because I've heard the same thing. Like, I've seen all these states up here, but then when I actually talk to the schools, it's like, well, we really haven't received anything yet in BIM, and I'm like, well, isn't it a state? So I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Our capital projects department isn't really good about aggressively going for as-bills.
Okay.
Or looking for Revit files in general.
Okay.
We have a number of projects where we should be getting them Revit files, but we're just getting as-bills at all.
Right, a lot of these groups have some form of standards, but whether they're clear standards that actually deliver an end product, it gets really muddy. Like sometimes, they may say we want an end product, but there's a loophole in it, and so it doesn't really have to be followed, but it's layered, and it'll get better and clearer. I took a few classes on BIM, and one of the things they said, if your BIM execution plan is 1 page long, that's way too short. Like, it really needs to be pages of information, because you need to be very specific about what you're expecting and what you want to get out of it. And that is at any level, because even architects have BIM execution plans. So, and then building standards too are thinking about BIM. So in facility management, that number at the top, 83% of the life cycle typically happens after construction. That number has been kind of tossed around a lot. There's some variations on it, especially for universities, as Dennis said. It's probably even more. And being able to utilize models and data, not just for maintenance, but also future expansion. And so a lot of these images that I'm about to show you, we found online just by looking up universities that have BIM standards, not just universities, but all that. And not all of them have anything about doors. Some of them do. That's one from Texas that they have information about doors, but a lot of times doors get left out, which is a lot of the reason why we're here, why we're talking to you, why we're doing this, is because we don't want doors to be left out. There should be a section on doors, because as Jeremy has been telling people, we talk about this a lot, doors are 2% of your project and 80% of your problems. Nobody notices a door until it doesn't work. I bet everybody can think of a door that they tried to use and it was really hard to open. And as soon as that happens, man, you're noticing that door. And that's not what should happen. You really shouldn't notice doors. They should be functioning and working properly. So don't forget about doors. And the information that you put in, you can always go out online and research and reference what other universities are doing and get an idea. Even if they are doing it, doesn't mean it's working perfectly, but at least they're recognizing it. And that's the whole point. This goes through how you know, if you decide to start working with BIM and doors and everything, how you should actually put contracts together about what you're expecting to get, kind of what we were just talking about. And this is one, I don't remember where this one is from, but this is from a university. And it lays out, it asks the bidder to explain not only their in-house BIM capabilities, but what they're expecting their vendors or third party to do with BIM, what they're using. And that's important that you recognize, like they spell out what softwares they're using. Recently there was a project that I heard about where someone was involved and they said, oh yeah, we can do BIM, we can do BIM. And when they got involved in it, they found out it was in, I think, ArchiCAD. And they could only use Revit. And so they had made this promise they could do BIM, and they can't do the same kind of BIM that the architect was working in and the contractor. So it is important to line up the softwares that everybody's using, which is kind of what the number C goes into. So just things to think about. You'll probably learn some things the hard way, but that's true for all of us. So
Have a BIM execution plan, like anything, cap, nothing? Okay,
Not at this time.
okay.
That's one of the steps we're working on.
and if I could throw out a class that I took, it was for CM BIM, is one of my accreditations, and it's put on by AGC. They talk a lot about BIM execution plans in those classes, so I highly recommend them. Like, you can learn a lot of information about what contractors are doing, what architects are doing, and what vendors are doing. I'm pretty sure there were end users there. I mean, it's open, I think, to anybody. So that's an excellent way to learn about, they will tell you all kinds of scenarios about where people have done things wrong and figured it out, or where they've saved money and things like that.
Pepper Construction that's here. Have you guys talked to Kevin, I think is his name at all? I don't know. Anyway, he was sat in a Spark session Wednesday. He kind of pulled us aside and he said their firm is out of Indianapolis is starting to get heavily involved in universities, and they're working specifically with IU, Purdue. It's like Big Ten schools everywhere, but in Butler University. But he's actually sitting down, their GC firm's sitting down with Butler to help them build their BIM execution plan.
Well, it
So
really
it's-
needs to be somebody like that.
Yeah.
Some firm that's been through some BIM projects. That's why I don't want to write a BIM execution plan, because I haven't been all the way through a project
Yeah.
using BIM. So it's got
That's true.
to come from somebody that's been all the way through it
Yeah.
Well, and
before we can develop it.
And that brings up a good point, though, because you can't just copy and paste what they have, because you're going to be different. Your university is going to be different. Yep.
And what's nice is now you can actually connect the dots from a GC all the way down to the actual manufacturer of some of the products that you would be receiving now, which is a nice part, because this piece here, what you saw in that Spark session with the software, is actually that link to tie all of that together for you. So you can receive then everything in a full format, just not your wiring and your HVAC and your plumbing, right? So.
Well, and Dennis had a great keynote, I mean, just fantastic, where he talked about, are you standing at the end of the conveyor belt just getting what you're getting, or are you demanding that you get what you want? And that's what the contracts and codes are really all about, asking for that information. So, what programs, where does Doors fit into all of this? Well, there's a lot of stuff out there for BIM, MEP, structure, that kind of stuff, but doors are tougher. So you really have to have somebody that really, really, really understands doors and hardware. So oh, I mean, it's just across the board. Like, you can see, like, there's a lot of plumbing ones going on. They show the federated models where you bring the structure and the plumbing together. They do things like clash detection. Do you guys know what clash detection is? Okay. Yeah, and very good about that. And that's actually something to think about, too. When I talk about the families, I was going to bring that up, is clash detection is something to think about with doors, too, with things like ADA clearance lines and door swings, because you can run into things like ceiling signs and things that you don't know about until the project is out. So.
I got another question. Sorry, I interject
it.
a lot. What's driving the initiatives from a university standpoint of collecting the? It seems like there's a shift of treating doors, frames, and hardware as assets in your system. Is that just something internally that's a kind of a buzz thing going on, or you guys even know what I'm talking about? You probably do, but I just seen a lot of schools like I work closely with Penn State, and they're moving all door, the reason they're capturing those exterior doors is because they want to consider them as assets. What does that mean? I mean, is that something in your own invoicing and PO processing work orders, that an asset is something you're looking at the return on that investment more so than just an expense item, or?
Well, indirectly for us, because it's a deferred maintenance item, and our deferred maintenance funding from the state got cut. And
Okay.
at the same time, we sort of discovered that the code application, as it had been applied, is different from how it should be applied. So we're trying to document all our fire doors and egress paths and stuff, and make a deferred maintenance plan. And obviously, doors and latching and fire doors are a big part of that. So we're trying to prioritize all this stuff. So that we can take what smaller deferred maintenance money we have and apply it in the right way to the highest priority stuff.
Got it. Makes sense. That's similar?
That's very similar, yeah.
Okay.
Because if the door is something that takes a lot of maintenance, so if you have that in as an asset so that you can have work orders and stuff against it right away, there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. That helps clear that up for me. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's good for me too. I didn't realize that. So.
Especially, if you don't mind, we have a lot
Yeah.
of high-rise buildings, and of course the code's changed a lot over the years, and so even if we make the code when the building was built, now we have to look at the upper stories and whether we have to change hardware on the upper stories, which frequently means changing the doors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no one's budget's increasing, right? Except IT. IT always seems to have endless budget.
Yeah. This slide really goes through how BIM is a collaborative process, particularly for us. The architect is starting out with some sort of door families when they're designing them or updating them, whatever they are doing. And a lot of times those are very poor door families, mostly because Rich and I were kind of talking about this. Somebody has to build those, and it takes a lot of time to build families. And so, and not only that, but when the architect builds them, they're trying to build them to meet a variety of project standards, not just one, not just a university that they're working with or a hospital that they are working with. So, and they're only putting limited amounts of information in there, either because they don't know a lot about doors and hardware or because they just don't want it. They don't want to weigh down their model, especially on big projects. The more stuff that's in the families, the bigger the file gets. There's some argument about why that happens and when that happens, but that's a lot of it. And then using that data to populate a specification, then of course sending it to the second part of the process, the BIM or the bid, and extracting that information and sending it to a distributor. It is really about not having to recreate information. So historically, the architect has drawn their plans, the specification writer has picked up those plans and done their part, and then the distributor takes the same thing and redoes it again, and the contractor redoes it again, and then the owner, well, they get their building, of course, but why is everybody redoing these pieces of the puzzle when you could just be reusing that information? And so it's no longer it's your problem, not mine, when that doesn't work because it broke down on your side of the process. It's everybody's working together for a more cohesive workflow. And that should be BIM in general, not just with doors and hardware and access control, but that is a battle that we are fighting. So, and then the last part, of course, and it goes into, so there's the creators, the architects and the specification writers who are designing, adding the content, building models, and then the consumers, which tend to be contractors, owners, facility managers, all of that. And the piece that is kind of hurting us, and it's not that it's hurting us, but we're still working on, is really the distributor level. The distributors are the ones that are going to tie it together. They're the ones that actually supply the product. And right now, they are the most behind out of everybody. So it's really going to take contracts and owners and facility management to say, all right, this is a BIM project. I expect the distributor to be working in BIM or some level of BIM as well, because they have to be able to provide the contractor the supplied version, what's actually being purchased, because a lot of times what gets written in the specification isn't actually what ends up on the job site, either because it changes manufacturer or that opening change, somebody at the last minute added a door, they changed something, and the distributor is getting that information. The specification writer may not be, but the distributor is. And so if the distributor can hand that off to the contractor starts at a much better place because they actually have the product that's going to be on site.
That are starting to invest in their own access control teams because they're realizing there's business out there that they're missing, right? They're going to, everything's moving towards electronics. So, wires are going to be coming out of it as one example. So they are coming along. The second one is there's a lot out there that are now focusing on lean construction too. So that's a big thing that Assa Abloy is actually involved in. We have, like Norwood's a huge distributor out of Cincinnati. When we deliver them product, there's a lot of pre-drilled stuff in the doors, the holes, and then they go in and they actually install the hardware in their facility. So when it gets to your job site, it's actually ready to go up. So so you're cutting out the waste and the chances of something not going right. So everything's done there. So there are major distributors. So as you're evaluating your distributors in the marketplace, figure out the ones that are going to actually come along for the ride with you and link that together. So they are there. They are there. It's just not, you could have someone in the same market that is so far ahead and someone that you've still been buying product from that is so far behind. And it's like, where do they fit, So it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I don't know that any distributors are still working in paper, but there's many that are still working in Excel. And there's half a dozen or more distributor softwares out there where they can actually communicate directly with the factories through that software. And so just something to think about. And so something that has really driven us forward and something we know very well, and anybody that writes door hardware specifications knows, is there's a lot of pieces to the puzzles. Traditionally, there's floor plans, there's door schedules, there's door elevations, there's codes, there's details. All of those pieces need to be compared and put together. And if it's just like an architect where they lay everything out on their desk and there's all these parts and you have to reference all these different pages. And BIM has made that better for us because it puts everything in one place. We're actually able to utilize that 3D geometry and pick up a door, and then we get that information that is revolving around that door all at once without somebody relying on somebody to make sure they're looking at the correct line in the door schedule and that they see that that door is fire rated and that kind of information. So. And that brings us to how do you get BIM in a useful format? That's a really big thing because you may be getting as-built models or you may start getting as-built models from your architects, from your contractors, but is the information in them actually useful? There's a lot of junk that goes into models. I've seen a lot of architect models, and a lot of them have so much information that's just wrong, and it's because they're not really being required to deal with that information. Nobody's looking at it, so getting it in a useful format, good information in, good information out kind of thing. So, and question is, how can the industry give this information to you better through BIM tools? It's something we're thinking about, our competitors are thinking about, anybody that deals with doors is really thinking about that. And it all comes down to what will be the new conventional process. When it's conventional, it won't be new anymore. Somebody gave me a great analogy the other day of they were talking about when the world switched from knobs to levers. And they were a distributor for a while. They're not now, but they said they went out to, I think it was a bank, and they were talking, and the guy was just so upset about all these stupid levers, and he's like, I don't understand why we have to have levers on the second floor because, people in wheelchairs can't get to the second floor, so why does it matter? Not considering that levers just aren't for people in wheelchairs and things like that. But it was because it was so new and everybody was fighting against it. And now levers are very common. You don't get anything else. So the new process will become, what will it be? That's what we're learning. But once it's no longer new, people won't argue as much about it or resist it so much because it'll just be normal. And so what are your expectations going into all of that? I think one of the expectations should be that you shouldn't get all of that stuff. And I know Dennis mentioned that, getting all of your plans and boxes of things, and at the end, that's not what you want.
Yeah, think about it. Instead of getting boxes on a job site like that, what if the doors and frames all came pre-drilled on the door and you were able to put it right in when it was needed? And there is processes like that out there right now.
Yep.
Going on.
that lean construction.
That lean construction through a number of distributors, so just reducing that waste and change orders. and
Well,
issues.
and not just that, but getting your plans at the end. I mean, they're not even just handed off in PDF or a flash drive or however, sent via an FTP site. It's its own separate site that you can just log into and get all of your information. It's just stored there in the cloud.
And
So
think about continuous hinges too, right? I mean, the number of drill holes you have, there's like 20, right? So a guy that's out there, he gets his hinge, he's got the door, and he's drilling out there in the field. What if that just showed up with that already pre-drilled in the factory?
well, it also brings up sometimes the distributors won't get a change order that's happened like halfway through, like maybe an opening becomes fire rated or something for some reason and now needs an exit device and it goes out to the field with a lock set on it. They can't just swap that out. They have to get a whole new door because they prepped that door incorrectly and change it. And BIM helps us catch things like that. It is helping us catch things like that. So, and lean construction helps you fix that too, because you get that.
You do have a guest appearance back there, Jose. How are you?
Number 4.
So I'm sneaking there. Actually, he's, you all know Jose? Yeah. Okay, I figured. Yeah, he might, actually, Jose, I'll put you on the spot here. Now you have a BIM execution guide on your website, plan, right? How long have you been requiring projects to be delivered in Revit or BIM?
Since 2012.
Okay. How many have you actually received?
Well, we see all of them. We have a process where we make sure we, except one actually, where we make sure we set it to the process and we get, most of them are coming with this tool already in use and the specifications are already from here, so working out great.
Yeah. So you're receiving, since 2012, you've been receiving all doors, frames, and hardware in that delivered model to you, or is that just new? Or coming, I guess I should say.
Well, the project is started in 2012, so it was finished in 13, close to 14. And since then, they've been using this thing, BIM and Revit and in this tool. There's very few who don't have this because our specs are written with this tool.
With Opening Studio, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Open Studio.
Just gives you pretty pictures. Facility management, I talked about this in the Spark session too, about how you can, you can be on the front end or the back end of a process, either by creating your design standards up front that you require your architect to use, or you can use it for facility management, of course, at the end. And then you could also take an existing project that's already been completed and turn that into your design standards too. So that's actually a good reason when you go through that whole process. At the end, you come up, you say, hey, we loved our set of door families on this. We want our architects to use these on every project going forward. Something to think about. And there's softwares, of course, that don't utilize Revit, that can pull information out of Revit or MicroStation or ArchiCAD, whatever you're using, and pull it in and look at information in a different way, and it trims it down. Everybody know what a federated model is? There's plenty of things that do federated models, pull that together. There's all these different softwares, so you have lots of different options, which is great when you're looking at what you want to gather, what information you want to review. And so it's important to not, look at as many softwares as feasible to really find the one that fits what you're doing. So you can have either intelligent Revit models that are full of parameters that have good information in them. This actually shows some parameters that say things like, this is cool because it actually tells you what the cost of the frame is. It tells you how it's welded, all of that good information, plus probably much, much more. You can do that, or you can store that information elsewhere. There's some debate about should you store all of your information in Revit, or should you have other programs that store your information. I think it was a presentation from HOK, and they were discussing that, about where should you save your information. Should it actually be in the Revit model, or could it be in other programs? And I thought it was a very interesting way of looking at it, because I think a lot of architects think you have to put everything in Revit, and you don't.
Question. Got 3 universities in there. what kind of facility management software systems are you using? I've heard Maximo thrown around, I've heard Ames. Just to see what kind of, Famous? Okay, homegrown?
Homegrown, but it started out as FME.
Okay,
Gotcha.
Famous.
Famous, okay, interesting, okay. Now, is this something that, this tool, as you guys start collecting this data, obviously this is not to replace your facility management software. It's kind of to complement it in the way that, people can have access to this information and see where the doors are at. Is this something that you guys see as something that needs to integrate into your current facility management software? Or is this something that you could say, you know what, if we have a question about what's on a door, you can have a client workstation set up, you go into the software and you can visually see it, or your maintenance person can see it. Is it crucial that it integrates into that system? So yes and no?
That's a great example of how it's different.
Yeah, because,
It would have to be in our famous system, I think.
okay. So what can you see in that?
They're not gonna go to a different system for this stuff.
Gotcha.
They're gonna go and do it where they do everything else, because there's not, at least at Iowa State, there's not just a door person. They do everything.
Okay.
So they're doing multiple things, so they're not gonna go to different systems to look things up.
So when they go to Famous, what do they, if they have a question about, say they get dispatched, I don't know if you guys are split up in zones or districts, but however that shapes out, they get dispatched to zone 4, there's an issue with the opening. Do they go into that, are they going into that system to pull information out before they get dispatched out, or?
At this time, they're not going into that because we don't have it.
Okay, so what can you see in Famous then?
At this point, we haven't tied drawings in at all.
Okay.
That.
It has the capability though to do
that.
that?
Yes, and that's where we want to go
Okay,
in the near future.
because you process orders out of there as well.
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to take your drawings and attach them in there from the building. So going to view this in a 3D model to actually see what's there would be something that would be a preference to be integrated into.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is you would maybe have the model to see where the door was located, but once you get to the door information, then you're all to just the cut sheet information about the door.
I think,
And it doesn't have to be in the model, it's just the information then.
I think what we're trying to do is download some of the information, the key information from the model into the lock shop module
Okay.
of our famous system. And then keep whatever is in the model, wherever, just keep everything else that's spec'd out, like, in the model or in your database. And if you want to see it, we can link out to your database or link out to the specs or the cut sheets that you can produce from your software, from Famous into your cut sheets. Very minimal information, whatever the lock shop guys need to see, that's what we would put in the church, and they would, and the rest would stay in the model. You could see it in the model, you could see it in the cut sheets.
How are you doing that link between Famous and Open Studio?
We haven't done that yet. I'm talking about how I want to do it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so how you're, okay.
Sorry, if I may, does Famous pull information out of Revit?
Yes, manually. It's through a spreadsheet. Yeah, it's not. They haven't talked very well yet, but integrated. So spreadsheet is the way to integrate. But what it does, it gets some of the data over that allows for the links to go back. We've done that for equipment, and the door is just like any asset or equipment in Famous. It's something else you maintain. A lock is something else you maintain. Right, Church?
Yeah.
But that brings up a good point too, when we were talking about software requirements, having a medium is fine, two softwares may not talk to each other, but if there's another software in the middle that does, that's important information to them as well.
We're just poised to we're looking to buy new software for project management and for program management and document management, and so we've been talking a lot over this week. And a lot of the document management software doesn't work with Revit, so we've been talking about exactly this, but it does say that you work with a 3D PDF, which contains all the BIM information, so if we saved our Revit models as 3D PDFs, we could get at all the Revit information with something like Meridian. And so we may have our heads in claws right now, but it looks like you can link it all through the document management maybe.
Yeah. That's good information to know. That's what we're going through with contractors right now, because they all use different softwares too. It's like, what's the median?
But that's still one thing, yeah, that I see that Revit's missing is the viewer, so that you can start doing those things
Yeah.
to people that don't run the software, being able to go in and look at the data and stuff.
Yeah, Revit doesn't seem to play well with anybody right now.
Yeah.
No, I mean, they can do some Excel outputs, which is good, and then they work with other software sometimes that do Excel outputs, which they can be found there. Revit does have a viewer, actually,
Yeah.
but, I mean, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't think, this is just pretty pictures, talking about doing things new ways and how you should be able to, this is a good example of how you can have all of this data about your door hardware in Revit. Not just the frame and door information, but also your door hardware. This actually lays out like each piece. Have you ever seen a hardware set before? How many line items can be in a hardware set? It's a lot of information. So what a lot of architects are starting to do is they're starting to pull that information into Revit, so they don't have to open up the door schedule and the spec book and the floor plan and coordinate all that. They just click on the door in Revit and pull up what information is on that door. Okay, so this goes through some of the things to think about. We've talked about a lot of this, doing virtual design specs with BIM models, digital access. It's going to kind of flip through, and so it catches up before I can. But with the virtual design specs, guides, whatever you want to call them, it's really for your difficult openings, your openings that have access control, maybe ADA. This goes through green. What kind of openings you're documenting, like on your existing buildings. I know we've talked about that a lot. Like windstorm is a big deal depending on where you live. And then aesthetically, just getting the right look, especially on, the nicer buildings tends to be very important. Any like your alumni centers and that kind of thing.
Does aesthetics come up at all within your discussions? Yeah, the reason I asked that is I was out at Stanford and they just hired a new guy that oversees their housing, and he's charged with redoing their design standards. And literally, aesthetics was one of the top 2 criteria as far as just even different types of hardware and doors and everything that this gentleman was looking at, which just, that's a full, I don't want to say this on here, but it's a pretty big business for our organization as far as our decorative line, which we won't get into today, but it's, think about that as you're writing your specs and building those plans, that there are, without jeopardizing the grade of quality of a particular hardware, you can get some.
It comes up on the new buildings, but then after that, it's match the existing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so until you have a brand new campus.
For the next 100 years, you're trying to match what was.
It also comes up on the real old buildings when you're changing from knobs to levers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Trying to fly through these next few just so we can talk about Revit. We don't got a lot, less than 15 minutes, so we'll go through them quick. So this just goes through how do you get all your data, like your cut sheets, and that's understanding what your actual product looks like, and all the features involved, installation diagrams. Does your maintenance staff know how to reinstall a new exit device if they need to do that? Where is that information at? How do they get it? Things to consider. Wiring diagrams, which can be very important when you're sending somebody out to do maintenance work, if they understand what power comes to that door or where the power is going from that door. And templates, which also ties into installation, like templating exit devices. Closers, you have to template closers very specifically, otherwise the door may not open far enough or the closer may rip out of the door. So that's really important stuff. And knowing, it's really important to know when doors are supposed to swing 180 degrees for that same reason. It's how they template those closers. just being able to visualize what your openings look like, finding them easily. It should not be a long process to figure out where an opening is on the floor plan. You should be able to find that information quickly, understand the frame information, the door information, and then the hardware information as well.
Those views you showed,
Yep.
are those, I'm sorry, the views, are they,
Yes, go ahead.
are those in Revit? The views of-
These are not. Nope, these are in any software.
So, on the right, the one on the right,
Uh,
yeah, okay,
Oh.
they're in the,
hold on, hold
I see it, I remember now.
on. Okay.
I think some of the guys will find those useful.
Yeah, yeah. That side, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, because it's really a dumbed down version of the information you're looking at. And I know there's some softwares out there that do this where you can like shut off different things, like you can shut off the floors so you can really get a concept.
You know how I talked earlier about, you know, from Famous,
Mhm,
linking out to the cut sheets for the doors?
mhm.
Could I link from Famous to this floor plan? Like an external link, and just open up like this?
That's a good question. Talk to us afterwards, and we'll
Okay.
see if that's an option, because we probably have to go back and talk to a developer and find out. So, but I bet you could. I bet you could. And tracking and reporting, yearly inspection, product replacement. We've been talking about that. That's kind of a big thing that you need to do. So I have 2 slides left. This is the second to last. So where's the value in using BIM and hardware and openings and access control, all of that? You should be able to visualize your openings before they get installed on site so you know what they look like, you know what you're getting. More effective way of communicating and enforcing standards. Rather than just requesting something, you say, this is what I want you to use because I know if you put that in your model, it has our standards in it when you're working with architects, reducing waste and better control of your construction costs. And that also goes into change orders. Accurate data and information through the project life cycle, and BIM software for your educators and classrooms. I mean, do any of you have an architecture program? Yeah, you do? So, I mean, a lot of the softwares you can teach the students too. The more they go out into the market knowing when they graduate, the better off they are.
We're starting to partner with universities out there to give a student version of this. So we're going to be aligning ourselves with them. So when they get out of their, they graduate, coming into whatever architectural firm they end up with, or even a school, they have some familiarity around it and they'll be caught up. But yeah, you guys probably know this, but I'm still amazed sometimes that, at the end of the day, universities are the customer both to the architect and to us. And I think sometimes from what I've seen is you guys maybe underestimate the power that you may have to push through what you want. And we even see that in some third-party developing that's coming onto campuses as well. It's we spend a lot of time. It's like, well, we don't own that building, but we're gonna own it in 10 years, or we're gonna manage it and take it over. But a lot of schools are going to one-card systems, and all of a sudden you're going to have students that are living over here that are going to have a particular lock on their door that's not doesn't fit into their one-card system. So it's all about the student experience. So kind of goes back to whatever you guys want. Dennis mentioned it. It's just really sit down and work with the architect and say, this is what we want. Ultimately, you're the customer at the end of the day, and it's important. So we've seen schools that have actually had a third-party developer that actually got you guys were able to get I say you guys, the universities were able to get the actual locks that they have on their own campus that they own because of that student experience. They wanted that one-card system. So they were able to push that through. So if you're hiring an architect and they're under you should be able to do that as well. So.
The last slide, just some pretty pictures about all the different things BIM can do, all these different things, renderings, whatnot, and where the doors fit in. Really quick, I'm going to sit down because I have to use Revit because it's just the kind of program Revit is. I'm going to show you some things that you could ask for, have in your Revit models, and talk about things that aren't in my particular Revit model that you could have. There's lots of different frame types that are available out there. This is a door. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see it. These are called typically like cap or wrap frames because they wrap the wall. And if I zoom in, you can see it gives you a very detailed view of that frame. And if you change your wall thickness, let me switch back to properties here. Revit Rabbit's sleeping. It's really slow. But if you change your wall thickness, that frame can grow and shrink. Rabbit's done for the week, apparently.
Thanks.
My processor must be tired. Anyway, there we go.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it, but it can grow and shrink with the wall. And lots of architects use frames like this. They oftentimes will call them drywall frames because they're typically used within drywall. Yep. And then there actually should be a parameter of some kind when you have that going on that actually gives you what the frame depth is. It tells you, well, you don't worry about the offset, but what the wall thickness is too. Very good information. Architects can actually schedule that so they do a better job checking submittals and things like that so they have accurate information. So you have cap frames can be an option, or like I said, drywall frames, wrap frames. And then you also have, and my frame's kind of goofed up here, you also have butt frames. Let me fix this before I really zoom in. You have butt frames that really don't care about the wall thickness. They just sit in the wall. They're typically on masonry. And you should be able to place those frames. This is something that you'd have to build into it if you don't have them in your families, but where you could change your check boxes and choose where that frame is sitting in the wall. So that's some cool stuff that's available. And I mean, that would have a frame depth parameter as well. It would just be more static. And then when you place it, you can decide where it's used, what kind of, or where it sits in the wall, which that's important, right? Because if you have a door that's aligned to the interior, but it's supposed to swing 180 degrees, I accidentally collapse that, it's gonna hit the wall.
Yep.
So you do want to consider those things. I've seen, I don't know how many plans where somebody has a great big wall and they're trying to, and it's not even if the door is supposed to swing 180 degrees, but it's gonna hit the wall right on that corner. So it's really important to model it correctly to have those options. Otherwise, the door is gonna get beat up really fast if it actually got installed that way. And of course, swing angles, I just showed you how I can change the swing. You should be able to change swings. A lot of times in existing floor plans, the swing's 45 degrees, or maybe there's a closet right behind it, so you have to swing, or another door, so you have to swing it differently. And then ADA clearance lines, which is actually what you're seeing here. There's different types of ADA clearance lines. There's side approach, front approach. This is a front approach, but you should have side approach as well. So, considering like if you have like an alcove or something where a door is, if a wheelchair came in there, they should be able to turn. And a lot of architects are doing ADA lines and swing lines as 3D geometry, so you could run clash detection, and that's where if a door is swinging open and there's like an exit sign in the hallway, you would know if you're going to hit that exit sign, so that exit sign can be moved or the door can be moved before it gets built. So those are some really good things that we've seen architects do. You can also, there's a whole myriad of things you can do. There's some API stuff that you can do with, if you rate a wall. If the wall has a fire rating, you could also do the same for the door, so the door is automatically rated. Fire ratings are one of the worst things for architects because they change so often during the project that a lot of times they forget to go update the door schedule after they update the wall. So there's not a great solution for that. There's some architects, and if you go out and Google it, and I think if you look up API fire ratings, walls and doors, you can find some information. So if somebody's good at working in the API, the code side, they can actually code it to pick up the fire rating of the wall.
So will it keep the assemblies together? Like if we're doing a 1 hour door, will it automatically put it in a 1 hour frame?
Yeah, it kind of considers them one piece
Yeah.
already, so it should, because there should just be one, right, there should just be one fire rating for both the door and the frame. You may find architects that break that apart. That shouldn't be very common, but it is possible that they break it apart. Do you understand what parameters are and everything? And door schedules in Revit are built out of parameters. And so we get a lot of architects that will have a whole bunch of parameters they're not using, but they're named something very similar. So when you start thinking about your BIM execution plans, how accurate you want the model to be, the less bad information you want in there, the more time it takes the architect, the more complicated it gets. But I think that that's where it should try to go, because you want the most accurate model possible. You don't want somebody clicking on a door and saying, there's 2 fire ratings here, which one's right? So just things to think about as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything. Do you have any specific questions? I know we're almost out of time, but.
Well, Well, this may be a dumb one, and I
That's
don't
okay.
actually draft anymore, but
Mhm.
if we use the opening studios and we're just getting up and running with BIM stuff and Revit, do you guys have someone who can come out and work with our drafters to get it going? And
Yep.
help them use it?
Yeah, we have a full, like I'm one of the trainers and there's other trainers.
We have
across
10
the country.
across the country,
Yep.
Okay.
so they're all split up regionally.
Yep, and our job is to come out and help people learn how to use it and figure out what they want to get out of it. So, yep.
Great.
Yep.
And I'd be remiss too to say while we were talking about ADA, I'll put my sales hat on for 1 second. I promise. I'll take it off soon. We actually acquired a company in February. It's an ADA. The product is actually called ADA EZ. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it's actually a door-mounted auto operator. So it's battery power, so it regenerates itself. So in the right application, you don't need to run power to it, and it door mounts. So if you have an area where it's like, you have a student come in, it's like, I need to add ADA accessibility to this door, but it has a low clearance on the top, ceiling to the door, where you can't put a traditional operator. All of it, this one mounts on the door. So it's significantly less expensive, and your own facilities team can install it and manage it itself, so you don't have to call an auto operator person to come program it and do all of that. So it's significantly cost effective. It's really not designed to replace a power operator, but in the instance where you have high traffic through an opening that has a low clearance, you do have the option to power that. So you can then use it 100% of the time. The battery operated one is about a 25% manual use. Kind of just regenerates itself, and then someone does hit the button, it's going to work. It's going to work fine. So that we added that to our product portfolio in February. So you can talk to your local sales reps about it, but it's really kind of taken off a little bit. We've generated a lot of interest.
Okay. I've got a question about this for Jose. There, I guess, since they've got a BIM execution plan, do you have parameters and everything in your BIM execution plan?
Yes.
Okay.
We have about, the website showed the wrong link. That link is been updated.
Mhm.
If you go to the same, there was a website out there in PowerPoint. It's on the basis of design documents now.
Mhm.
And so there it shows you there's about 60 or 68 parameters now.
Okay,
For
so
assets.
you've got like your door parameters that you want listed in your execution.
We have not for doors, frankly.
Okay.
For doors, it's a different issue. We're focusing on, we call them major managed assets.
Okay.
And the major managed assets are the MEBF equipment.
Mhm.
That's what we want to fix first, so the parameters. The doors are also very critical, but we haven't taken off yet, yet. We'll probably have the same parameters.
But you do it the same way as the way you're doing it now. You
Yeah.
add them as you, into your.
They're just an acid in Vegas, so it will be the same way.
Yep.
I think.
Yeah, and it'll take time for you to figure out exactly what you want.
Yes.
Just the way it works.
And what we want is we asked the technicians what they wanted, and that's what we asked for. In this case, we haven't asked the lock shop what they want. They know what they want, but when they tell us, we'll put them in. We'll extract only those and put in the things. So it's based on what we are really, like Chuck said, somebody said, it's really what they're going to use. Focus on what they're going to use, not on what would be nice to have, but what they're going to use.
That's a good point. Yeah. Start small too.
Yeah.
Well, those are questions. I think that's probably it.
We'll be on your campus in a couple months,
Oh,
in Des Moines at Iowa State,
okay.
for that APA event.
All right.
What's that?
Mappa?
Yeah, for MAPA, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll
right.
have a booth there. So not sure yet if I'm going to be there or not, but
Good.
may see you again.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.